The transition from Rome as a republic to an empire was a long and epic journey. A story filled with conflicts such as Hannibal at the gates of Rome, the Macedonian Wars, the tyranny of Sulla, the emergence of Caesar and his campaigns in Gaul, followed by Octavian's inevitable crowning as imperator. But for all of these epic campaigns to take place, Rome had to find its way through the turbulent times from when the Republic met its first real struggle. The rise of Rome and its inevitable domination over Italy, as you might expect, led them into conflicts with all kinds of cultures, such as the fierce Samnites to the south, the wealthy Etruscans to the north, not to forget the barbarian tribes from Gaul that inhabited the lands beyond them. However, even before these great powers ever were considered an enemy of Rome, the neighboring Veii of similar humble rule had served its opposition longer than most cared for. At least if you asked any citizen of these two settlements the Romans controlled back then. Hence Marcus Camillus, the paterfamilias of the House of Furia, that were almost seen as tyrants of the Republic, was granted the role of dictator, a title which granted great benefit to the beholder. After this appointment, he quickly took command of Legio Prima Italica, the only army available, and massively enhanced its military strength. It was mostly comprised of people who bought their own equipment. Thus the army was quite varied in terms of armor, with only a few men of the elite being able to afford a chestplate, highly similar to the Greek hoplites. By the upcoming summer, after the Veii failed to take the port of Ostia, Camillus besieged the Veii capital, waiting for the newly formed Legio Gemina that was on its way to reinforce. However, they wouldn't get there in time before the Etruscan nation still laid out. The legion formed up in the standard spear front line, all waiting for the enemy to charge. Camillus himself led the cavalry out on a flanking maneuver. Here he waited for the hostiles to commit into combat, but after realizing the enemy skirmishers were about to cripple the Roman front line, Camillus ordered the spear units to charge. Once the two lines were locked together, Camillus fanned out his cavalry to perform rear charges all along the enemy back line. This effectively routed the entire Veii army, making it easy for the cavalry to hunt down the rest. Any survivors of the battle were enslaved. Once Legio Gemina arrived, the city was at first sacked, just to be further looted and occupied later. Camillus had proven himself a dread commander, and in principle finished the war with this single offensive. He would afterwards step down from his dictatorship, returning the Republic to its consular ruling system. Not that this changed the public opinion about the Furian family being tyrants. This basically left the Veii with a squashed army and no gold, as most of it came into Roman possession courtesy of the city being looted. This gold was spent on establishing trade deals with, for instance, the Sabines to the east and the Greek colonies in Campania. They were at war with the Samnites and desperately needed any assistance they could acquire. The Etruscan nation of Tarquina to the north refused any form of relations. Same could be said about the wealthy Carthaginian merchants from Africa. Both troubling signs that you probably can figure out what we're leading towards. But a more pressing issue came in the form of the Volsci, who tried to jump upon the vulnerable state this previous battle left the Roman army in. Hence a peace was quickly established with the Veii, letting them live so all the available soldiers could march south without worrying about Rome being attacked. The Italian Wars had begun. However, another major issue was tormenting Camillus and Prima Italica. Apart from the woeful economy limiting the size of the legion, a massive famine was disrupting any hope of replenishing the army. To make matters worse, the Volsci continued to increase their own numbers. Legio Gemina couldn't help out either due to the general feeling among the plebeians of Furian tyranny, leading to extreme unrest on top of what the famine already caused. It was only by merging the cohorts of Prima Italica and enlistment of the poorest proletari, who barely could afford any equipment, Camillus re-established something that resembled an army. To make matters worse, the Sabines to the east, who were a Roman trade partner, were defeated by the Umbrians, which thus posed a threat from the mountains. Only by the thinnest of margins was a second frontier avoided. With his army of peasants, Camillus marched out to deal with the invading Italians, to then quickly march south and counterattack. After all, an army of sheep could still pose a threat, with a lion leading them. Also, the Umbrians actually turned out to be a more reliable friend than the Sabines, as they genuinely helped out with the rebellions troubling Roman lands. During this time, a man accused of killing a Carthaginian official offered a large sum of gold in exchange for sanctuary, something the Romans were more than willing to give due to the previous failed negotiations. The Carthaginians saw this as a major insult. But hey, they started and now we gain 2,000 denarii for the dried up Roman treasury. On the front line, Camillus and the Proletari attacked the Volsci commander trying to muster an army just outside the city of Antium. However, he was quickly reinforced by the town, turning this into a more difficult battle than initially intended. While the more disciplined units slowly advanced, the Proletari charged straight into the Volsci forces. Despite massively outnumbering the opposition, their lack of proper armor or military training resulted in high casualties, and even some units routing entirely. However, through the presence of Camillus and the slingers flanking around the enemy lines to fire into the rear, a chain rout started to form. A feast for the Roman cavalry. Despite this battle showing the flaws of the peasant recruits, it was enough to seal this walled port settlement and loot it for any riches that could help better the unrest in Rome. Furthermore, the Roman scholars continued to develop the economic sphere, mainly with regards to trade and agriculture. But there was no time for administrative affairs, as the Volsci were on the brink of collapse, with the Frentani tribe already having taken Casinum, and now Rome just outside their last town. As you might expect, a town we, the Romans, wanted as our own. With the departure of Camillus and as a result of his treatment of the city, its citizens were on the brink of another revolt. To solve this issue, he appointed another member of the Furian family to administer the land, a task which he honestly performed quite well by forming an alliance with the neighboring tribe. However, this didn't solve the real problem, which was the tyrannic power the Furian family had over the Senate. This just made it worse, just like all the fame Camillus gained for barely taking the last Volsci settlement before the Frentani. This left the only other town outside of Roman or allied influence within this province known as Latium in the hands of this far-stretching Italic nation. It was a war Camillus desperately wanted to pursue despite the larger armies of the Frentani. However, for the first time the Senate managed to overrule Furian opinion, instead seeking to aid the Greek trade partners in Campania against their Samnite oppressors. A non-aggression pact and military access was quickly established with the Frentani, making any conflict with them unthinkable. By now, the Samnites owned most of Campania, meaning Roman intervention couldn't wait. Along with the breakthrough in disrupting Furian dominance, a notable politician of the Licinian family, Gaius Calvus, took command of Prima Italica. He quickly began mustering new troops to the army as a spy revealed a large Samnite force stationed at Capua, the town closest to the Roman border. With a lot more time on his hands, Camillus turned to subterfuge in order to silence an Aemilian politician who was a well-known pacifist and someone who loudly spoke out against Camillus' warlike personality and plans. Publius Catullus, the man in command of Legio Gemina, became the new paterfamilias of the Aemilian family. Although it was evident Camillus was behind the assassination, no one in the Senate cared to prosecute him, as this in general was seen as the greater good for Roman interest. By 394 BC, Gaius Calvus had strengthened the Prima Italica legion to such an extent that he felt confident on going back on the offensive once more. Legio Gemina, though of lesser strength, followed along as reserves. This was at the risk of the unrest back home potentially getting out of control, but its presence was deemed more important in the war against the Samnites. During their journey south, a Daunian diplomat came to us asking for an alliance, as they feared our growing interest in the south. We agreed to this, hoping they could secure control of the southern provinces, Calabria and Lucania for us. Once the Roman legions reached Samnite territory, no armies were to be seen. Calvus tried to raid the countryside, hoping to provoke the Italians into a field battle, but without effect. Instead, he could simply lead the army into Capua, defeat the smaller garrison, and take the spoils of war. This, however, was enough to bring forth the Samnite army, half of it encamped at a strong position nearby, and another further south. Fearing what could happen if the Samnites consolidated their forces, the Senate granted Gaius Calvus dictatorial powers, which he used to engage the fortified Samnites. Here he quickly overwhelmed the encampment before any reinforcements could arrive. Once the army was defeated, Calvus seized control of the fort and ambushed the other approaching Samnite army. One entire flank of the Samnites fled by the revelation of our superior numbers, meaning the main bulk of the elite infantry was encircled and destroyed. With the rapid advance of Prima Italica and Gaius Calvus, Neapolis was conquered. Through the city, we learned of an even larger Samnite army on its way north. Fearing an assault on the city, Calvus replenished Legio Prima Italica with the cohorts of Legio Gemina. No attack ever occurred. Back home, a criminal gang protected by a patrician was running rampant, destroying everything. Fearing the potential consequences our action could bring, we simply ordered Camillus to appease the plebs with a speech. A fool's hope for sure, that only served to anger the citizens. Camillus was definitely more of a military leader rather than an orator. Back south, eager to act while in possession of dictatorial powers, Calvus charged out, defeating the Second Samnite army in a swift maneuver which gave the Italians little time to react. Shortly thereafter, he advanced down to Poseidonia and defeated the last Samnite army, clearing Campania of hostile scum and saving the Greeks. Soon thereafter, the Samnite capital fell to the Dardanians, performing their task in securing the south. Campania was to become one of the more lucrative provinces of the Republic, with its main focus on supplying Rome with food for future wars. The age of famine from the start of this campaign was resolved. The public order issues, on the other hand, wasn't, especially with rumors going on about Rome running out of grain. However, with the conquest of Campania, Camillus decreed food aplenty to be given out to the people, aiding to content the plebs. The Italian wars were all but over, with Legio Gemina staying in Campania to safeguard this new valuable land. Gaius Calvus and whatever remained of Prima Italica returned back to Rome. Here they would rebuild and try to stabilize the nation. However, this was all but impossible, with the rich Etruscans to the north expanding into our sphere of influence. The Veii, whom we all but destroyed, had lost their final settlement with the Etruscan nation Tarcuna. And if this wasn't bad enough, they were also invading our Umbrian trade partners. If we didn't act, the Etruscans would surround Rome, putting us at their mercy. This simply couldn't happen. Without a complete legion, Gaius Calvus and Prima Italica attacked, assisted by the governor of Veii, to crush and defeat the Tarquinian forces, pushing them back out of our lands. Gaius Calvus and Prima Italica had effectively kicked the hornet's nest by performing this attack without being ready for it. The Roman Republic was in a dire state. The army wasn't at full strength, the economy was weak, the political scene unstable just like public opinion, and now the Etruscan wars had begun.